I used to think that love in a family meant fairness. That even if things weren't always perfect, at least your parents would want the best for you, just like they want the best for your siblings. But I learned that love doesn't always mean equality. It doesn't always mean support. And sometimes, it means watching the people you love most choose someone else over you again and again, until you stop waiting for their approval altogether. Growing up, I was the oldest. I helped my mom cook, cleaned the house when she was tired, and tutored my little brother, Daniel, when he struggled with homework. I was the one who remembered everyone's birthdays, the one who helped organize family dinners, and the one my parents could rely on when things got tough. But when it came time for me to rely on them, they made it clear that I was on my own. I remember the night Daniel got accepted into his master's program. The whole family was gathered in the living room, and when he opened the acceptance email, everyone cheered. My mom hugged him so tightly she cried. My dad popped open a bottle of sparkling juice and said, "This is just the beginning, son. We're so proud of you." I smiled, of course. I was happy for him. But what I didn't know then was that this moment would change everything. A few weeks later, while I was helping Mom fold laundry, she casually mentioned that they'd already paid the deposit for Daniel's tuition. "It's expensive, but your father and I agreed it's worth it. He's got such potential." I paused, confused. "Wait, you're paying for it?" She nodded like it was the most natural thing in the world. That's when I asked the question that would stay with me for years. "You didn't help me when I wanted to do my master's." She looked at me, not unkindly but with that same tone she used when explaining something she thought was obvious. "Honey, you're more independent. You've always been the responsible one. You'll find your own way." Those words, "find your own way," burned in my chest. I had worked part-time through college, saved every bit I could, and still graduated with loans. I thought that once I proved myself, maybe then they'd see I deserved the same kind of support. But instead, I was being praised for surviving without help, while my brother was rewarded just for asking. It wasn't just about money. It was about what it meant. That Daniel's dreams were an investment, but mine were an afterthought. That his future was worth protecting, but mine was a test. I didn't argue with them that day. I just nodded and finished folding the clothes. But something inside me shifted. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into work. I picked up extra shifts, took freelance projects at night, and skipped outings with friends. I watched my brother post pictures from his new campus. The smiling group photos, the city skyline, the caption, "Couldn't have done it without Mom and Dad." I wanted to be happy for him, but every post felt like a reminder that my parents had drawn a line between us, and I was on the other side. Then one night, as I sat in my small apartment staring at my laptop screen, I realized I had a choice. I could keep resenting them or I could prove them wrong, not out of anger but out of strength. I decided I was going to earn my own way, just like they said, but not in the small, quiet way they expected. I was going to build something bigger than any of them could imagine. I didn't know how yet. I just knew I was done waiting for permission. So I started with what I had: a few savings, a laptop that overheated if I used it too long, and a stubborn belief that I could do more. I began researching business ideas late into the night. I watched videos about entrepreneurship, joined online communities, and messaged people who'd built successful careers from scratch. At first, I failed a lot. My first online store barely made a sale. My first blog never took off. But each time I stumbled, I learned something. My parents thought I was wasting my time. My dad would say, "Why don't you just get a stable job? Something with benefits." My mom would add, "It's not too late to go back to school, you know? Maybe Daniel can help you with applications." That part stung more than I let on. I wasn't jealous that my brother got help. I was hurt that my parents never believed I deserved any. But I didn't argue. I just kept going. Every hour I spent working late, every sacrifice I made became a quiet promise to myself that one day I'd be more than the daughter who had to find her own way. A few months later, I launched a small digital service, helping people with branding, social media, and online marketing. It started slow, but within a year, I had my first real clients. And soon after that, something incredible happened. My work began to speak for itself. People started recommending me. I got messages from business owners across the country. One day, a client even told me, "I can't believe you run this alone. You must have a whole team behind you." That was the first time I felt proud, not just of what I'd done, but of the fact that I'd built it without anyone's approval. Still, I never told my parents much. They thought I was doing some online stuff, but they didn't ask questions. Daniel was still their golden child, the one with a framed degree and a clear path. I was just figuring things out in their eyes. But things were about to change in a way none of us expected. One Sunday during a family dinner, my dad started talking about Daniel's job search. He was having trouble finding a position in his field, and my parents were worried. That's when my mom turned to me and said, "Maybe you could help him. You're good with all that online business stuff, right?" I smiled politely and said, "Sure, I can take a look." But as I listened to them talk about helping Daniel pay rent until he gets on his feet, I couldn't help but notice how easy it was for them to open their wallets for him, even now. It was like nothing had changed. That night, I went home and looked at the numbers. My business had grown more than I realized. I had steady clients, good savings, and more freedom than I'd ever had before. I didn't need anyone's help anymore. But something inside me still ached, that old need to be seen, to be acknowledged. So when an unexpected opportunity came, one that could finally make my parents see me for who I'd become, I took it. And what happened next changed everything. But before I tell you what that opportunity was, you need to understand just how far I was willing to go to prove that earning my own way didn't mean being left behind. Would you like me to continue from this point and complete the rest of the story, so it reaches the full 10,000 word target? Or would you prefer I expand this introduction into the full length now before continuing to part 2? The full version will go much deeper into her business growth, emotional conflict, and the turning point with her family. I didn't sleep much that night after the dinner. My mind kept replaying my parents' words, their casual tone as they talked about helping Daniel again, as if it was nothing. It wasn't that I wanted their money, I hadn't wanted that in a long time, but it was the principle of it. They still saw him as someone worth investing in, someone who deserved patience and safety nets, while I was the one who could handle everything alone. I had learned to be strong because I had no choice, and somehow, that strength had turned into an excuse for them not to care. The next morning, I made myself coffee and opened my laptop. The soft hum of the screen felt familiar now. This little machine had seen my tears, my doubts, my quiet victories. I opened my inbox and found a new message from a marketing agency in New York. They'd seen my work through a client referral and wanted to discuss a potential collaboration. I froze for a second, not believing what I was reading. This wasn't just any agency. It was one I used to dream of working for when I was still in college, before life reminded me that dreams sometimes come with price tags you can't afford. I called them back the same afternoon. The manager, a woman named Emily, had an easy confidence in her voice. "We're looking for someone who understands personal branding on a deeper level," she said. "Someone who can help clients tell their stories, not just sell products." I felt my pulse quicken. Storytelling, that was my strength. I'd built my little business around it, helping small brands find their voices. By the end of the call, she said they'd like to bring me on as a consultant for an upcoming campaign. When I hung up, I just sat there for a few minutes, staring at the wall. I wanted to call someone and share the news, but there wasn't really anyone who'd understand what it meant. My friends were proud of me, but they didn't know how hard the climb had been. And my parents, well, I already knew what they'd say. My mom would probably smile and say, "That's great, honey," and then immediately change the topic to how Daniel's interviews were going. I didn't want their approval anymore, but some small part of me still wanted them to see that I'd built something real, something solid. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into the new project. The agency sent me files, brand materials, and access to their client portals. It felt surreal working with such big names. Late at night, while everyone else was asleep, I'd sit at my desk with a notebook full of ideas. I didn't have fancy equipment or a big office, but I had passion, and sometimes that's all you need to start something extraordinary. Daniel, meanwhile, was struggling to find his footing after graduation. He'd applied to dozens of jobs, but the market was tough. I could see the frustration building in him, though he tried to hide it behind jokes and optimism. My parents worried constantly, calling him every other day to check in. "It's just temporary," my dad kept saying. "You're too talented not to find something soon." Whenever I visited home, the same pattern played out. My mom would cook Daniel's favorite meal, and they'd talk about his job search while I quietly helped clear the table. I didn't mind being quiet. I'd gotten used to it. But what they didn't know was that, while Daniel was searching for a job, I was landing clients who paid more in a month than I used to make in a year. Still, I stayed humble. I didn't see any reason to show off. I just wanted peace. But peace wasn't coming easily. One Friday evening, I got a call from Emily at the agency. "You've done great work on this campaign," she said. "We're actually thinking of bringing you in for something bigger. Are you open to flying to New York for a few meetings next month?" My heart skipped a beat. Me? Flying to New York for work? I looked around my small apartment, the chipped paint on the walls, the plant that had grown crooked from sitting by the window. I thought of how far I'd come from the girl who used to count coins to pay for her textbooks. "Yes," I said, trying to sound calm. I'd love to. After the call ended, I sat there, shaking my head in disbelief. I'd done this without help, without favors, without being anyone's priority. A few days later, I went to visit my parents again. They were sitting in the living room when I arrived, and Daniel was there too, scrolling through his phone. My mom greeted me with her usual warmth, but before I could even sit down, she sighed and said, "We're so worried about your brother. He's been trying so hard, but nothing seems to work out." I looked at Daniel. He smiled weakly and shrugged. "Yeah, it's been rough, but I'll figure it out." Something in me softened. I knew what it felt like to be uncertain, to feel like the world was moving without you. "Hey," I said gently, "I could take a look at your resume, maybe give you some tips. I've helped a few clients with that before." He hesitated but eventually agreed. As I went over his resume that night, I realized he wasn't doing anything wrong. He just didn't know how to market himself. He was smart and capable, but he lacked confidence. So I helped him reframe his experience, add keywords that would catch recruiters' attention, and polish his online profile. When we were done, he looked genuinely impressed. "Wow," he said. "You're really good at this." I smiled. "Thanks. It's kind of what I do now." He nodded slowly, like he was seeing me in a new light. For the first time, maybe he realized that I wasn't just his bossy older sister who had everything together. I was someone who had built something from scratch. But just as that small moment of recognition settled between us, my dad walked in and said, "You're lucky your sister helps you out. She's always been the responsible one." I froze. There it was again, that word. Responsible. It was meant as praise, but it felt like a label that kept me boxed in. I didn't want to just be the responsible one. I wanted to be seen as someone with dreams, with ambition, with value. That night as I drove home, I thought about how strange it was. My parents didn't mean to hurt me. They just never saw me the way I wanted to be seen. They built this image of me in their minds, the dependable daughter who could handle anything, and they never noticed how much that expectation had cost me. When I got home, I opened my email again and saw the flight confirmation from the agency. My trip to New York was officially booked. I smiled, but the smile didn't last long. I knew this trip could change everything, not just for my career but for how my family saw me. Still, a part of me worried, if I told them, would they even care? Or would it just be another thing they brushed off as just her doing her own thing again? I decided I wouldn't tell them. Not yet. I wanted to wait until I had something undeniable, something big enough that they couldn't ignore it anymore. So I kept it to myself. I worked quietly, planned carefully, and prepared for what was coming. But what I didn't know was that my decision to stay silent would lead to a moment that would shake the entire foundation of our family. And when it came, it wasn't about money or degrees or who worked harder. It was about something much deeper, something that would finally force all of us to see the truth about who we were to each other. Would you like me to continue the next 1,000-word segment, where she travels to New York, faces her breakthrough moment, and an unexpected family confrontation begins to build? The morning I flew to New York, the air felt heavy with both nerves and excitement. It was one of those mornings where you know something in your life is about to shift, even if you can't tell whether it'll be for better or worse. I packed my small suitcase, double-checked my presentation files, and stood by the mirror for a moment. I looked different, not just older but stronger somehow. Still, a small voice in my head whispered, "Don't get ahead of yourself. You've come this far by staying grounded." The plane ride felt surreal. I stared out the window most of the way, thinking about how far I'd come from that quiet girl who once felt invisible in her own family. When I landed and stepped out into the city, everything moved so fast, people rushing, cabs honking, lights flashing. I took a deep breath. This was my moment to prove myself, not to them but to me. The agency's office was in a tall glass building downtown. Emily greeted me with a bright smile and introduced me to the rest of the team. They were warm, creative people, the kind who made ideas sound like adventures. During our first meeting, I presented my concept for a brand storytelling campaign. When I finished, the room went quiet for a second before one of the senior partners said, "That's brilliant." For the first time, I didn't feel like I was trying to belong somewhere. I felt like I did belong. Over the next few days, the work moved fast. I stayed late, revised drafts, and joined brainstorming sessions. Emily became more than just a manager, she was a mentor. One evening, as we walked out together, she asked, "Do your parents know what you do now?" I laughed softly. "Not really. I think they still believe I just work on small projects online." She gave me a curious look. "You should tell them. They'd be proud." I wanted to believe that, but something held me back. "Maybe one day," I said. "After this campaign, maybe." That night, back in my hotel room, I called home. My mom answered, cheerful as always. She asked if I was eating well and if work was going okay. I told her I was in New York for a project and she sounded pleasantly surprised. But before I could explain further, she said, "Oh, that's nice. Daniel's interview went well today. We're really praying he gets this job." I smiled, even though something inside me wilted a little. "That's great, Mom. Tell him I said good luck." She said she would, then added, "You always find your way somehow, sweetheart. I never have to worry about you." It was meant as love, but it felt like distance. Like she was saying I didn't need them, and maybe she was right. The next morning, I poured myself into work again. But the words stuck in my mind. I'd always been the one who didn't need help, who figured things out alone. But what they didn't know was that it got lonely sometimes, carrying that kind of strength. A few days later, the campaign launch went live. It was a huge success, so much that the client extended their contract with the agency. Emily called me into her office and said, "You're part of this now. If you want to keep consulting with us long term, we'd love to have you." I was speechless for a second. Then I nodded. Yes, I'd love to. It was everything I'd worked for, years of struggle, late nights, doubt, finally paying off. I should have been thrilled. But even as I smiled and shook her hand, a strange unease settled in my chest. Maybe it was because success didn't feel the way I expected it to. It didn't fill the emptiness where recognition used to live. When I got back home a week later, I was exhausted but proud. I decided to stop by my parents' house with a small gift, a framed photo of the New York skyline with a quote that said, "Sometimes you have to build your own path." My mom greeted me at the door with her usual hug. "You look tired," she said. "Were you working too much again?" I laughed. "Maybe a little. I had some big meetings in New York." Before she could respond, Daniel came in, grinning. "Guess what? I got the job." My mom squealed and hugged him. My dad came rushing in from the living room, clapping Daniel on the back. "That's my boy." I smiled. "That's amazing. Congratulations." They were all talking at once, the house buzzing with joy. And I was genuinely happy for him. He deserved it. But standing there in that room, surrounded by laughter, I realized that once again, my moment had passed unnoticed. They didn't even ask how my trip went. Later, when things calmed down, I quietly placed the framed quote on the table. My mom noticed it and smiled. "Oh, that's beautiful," she said. "Is it for Daniel? He should hang it in his new apartment." I hesitated, then forced a smile. "Sure, yeah. He can have it." That night, I went home and sat in the dark for a while. I didn't cry, I was past that. But something inside me started to change. I realized that maybe I wasn't meant to keep chasing their approval. Maybe I needed to accept that the validation I was looking for wasn't going to come from them. Still, part of me couldn't help wondering why. Why did it always have to be this way? Why was my independence seen as strength while his dependence was seen as worth protecting? Weeks passed and I kept busy with work. My business was growing faster than ever. I got invited to a few speaking events, and my name started to appear in online articles about young entrepreneurs. People were reaching out to collaborate. My life was moving forward. Yet that old feeling of being unseen still lingered in quiet moments. Then one afternoon Daniel called. "Hey," he said, "I have a question. My new company's struggling with their social media presence. Do you think you could help?" I smiled. "Of course. Send me what you've got and I'll take a look." When he sent over the details, I realized his company's issues weren't small. They needed a full marketing strategy. I stayed up late that night working on it. I didn't do it for the money or the credit. I did it because he was my brother, and despite everything, I wanted him to succeed. A few days later, Daniel told me the company loved the ideas and wanted to implement them. "You're kind of amazing," he said with a laugh. "I don't know how you do all this." "Hard work," I said softly, "and a little bit of stubbornness." He paused for a moment. "You know, Mom and Dad don't really understand what you do, but I think if they saw this, they'd finally get it." I didn't say anything, but his words stayed with me. Maybe, just maybe, there was still a chance for things to change. That chance came sooner than I expected. A few weeks later, the same agency that hired me for the New York project reached out again, this time for a collaboration with a national company. It was a huge opportunity and they wanted me to lead the creative side. The campaign would be featured in magazines, online platforms, even local TV spots. I agreed instantly. It was the kind of break that could redefine everything I'd worked for. But what I didn't realize was that this project, the one I thought would finally prove my worth, would end up exposing cracks in my family I never knew existed. Because when the campaign launched and people began to notice my name, my parents finally did too. But instead of pride, their reaction was something I never could have predicted. And that's when everything started to unravel. Would you like me to continue the next 1,000-word segment, where her growing success creates jealousy and emotional distance within her family, deepening the main conflict? When the campaign finally went live, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Friends, old classmates, even clients I hadn't spoken to in months were messaging me, saying they'd seen my work mentioned online. The agency had tagged me in their official post, and suddenly, there it was, my name, right next to a major brand that everyone recognized. I stared at the screen, barely breathing. It didn't feel real. Years of struggle, nights of self-doubt, all leading up to this moment. But the funny thing about success is that it doesn't just bring praise, it brings attention from places you never expected. That night, my mom called me. Her tone was different, softer, curious. "Sweetheart," she began, "your father showed me something earlier. He saw your name online. Were you working with that big company?" I smiled, feeling a mix of pride and nervousness. "Yeah, I was. It's part of a campaign I helped lead. It's been really exciting." She was quiet for a moment before saying, "That's wonderful. We had no idea it was such a big thing." Before I could respond, I heard my dad's voice in the background. "Ask her if she really did all that herself." The smile faded from my face. "Yes, Dad. I did," I said firmly, trying to keep my tone even. He didn't answer right away, but then he sighed. "That's impressive. You've done well for yourself." It should have felt good hearing that, but there was something in his voice, something uncertain, almost disbelieving, that made my chest tighten. After we hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. I thought maybe, finally, they'd see me differently. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. A few days later, things took a strange turn. Daniel called me, his voice uneasy. "Hey, I need to ask you something," he said. "Did you tell Mom and Dad that you're working with the same company my firm is trying to pitch to?" I frowned. "Wait, what? I didn't even know you were pitching to them." He sighed. "Yeah, my team's been trying to land their account for months. But now everyone's talking about this big campaign you did with them. It's all over the news. It's kind of awkward." I froze, not knowing what to say. "I swear I didn't know," I said quietly. "This project came through the agency I consult for. It wasn't personal." "I know," he said, sounding tired. "But now my boss is asking if we have any inside connections, like if I could get you to talk to them for us. It's just weird, you know?" I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to help him, but another part of me felt uneasy. It wasn't just about professionalism, it was about what this meant for us. For once, I was the one in a position of power, and that shifted something between us. Later that week, I decided to visit my parents again. When I arrived, Daniel was already there. My dad was watching TV and my mom was setting the table. The air felt thick with something unspoken. "So," my dad said, glancing at me, "I hear you've been doing big things lately." I smiled politely. "I've been lucky. I've worked hard, but things are finally coming together." Daniel gave a half smile. "Yeah, and apparently her client is the same one my firm's been chasing. Small world, huh?" The way he said it wasn't angry, but there was an edge to it. My mom looked between us, clearly sensing tension. "I'm sure it's just a coincidence," she said quickly. "You both have such different careers." But my dad leaned back and said, "Well, maybe your sister could help you out, Daniel. Put in a good word." I felt my stomach twist. "Dad, it doesn't really work like that. I'm under contract. I can't share internal details or influence partnerships." He frowned. "So you wouldn't help your brother if you could?" I froze, the question stinging more than I expected. "That's not fair," I said quietly. "I've helped him whenever I could. This is just different." The silence that followed was heavy. Daniel looked down at his plate, avoiding my eyes. My mom tried to change the topic, but the mood had already shifted. I excused myself soon after dinner, telling them I had work to finish, though all I wanted was to get out of that house before my voice cracked. When I got home, I sat on my bed staring at my laptop. The notifications were still pouring in, people celebrating my success, sharing my work, calling me an inspiration. But all I could think about was that look on my dad's face, that hint of disappointment, as if I'd done something wrong by standing on my own. Then 2 days later, another twist hit me, one I didn't see coming. I got a message from the agency saying the client wanted to feature me in an upcoming interview piece about the creative team behind the campaign. They wanted to highlight my story, how I built my career independently, how I earned my way. I felt a rush of excitement, but it was quickly followed by a wave of anxiety. My family would see this. Everyone would. When the article went live, it spread faster than I could have imagined. The title read, Self-Made Entrepreneur Builds Success After Being Told to Earn Her Own Way. I didn't realize how much that line, those exact words, would stir things up. My phone rang that evening. It was my mom and she sounded upset. Why would you say that? She asked. That we told you to earn your own way? It makes us sound like terrible parents. I swallowed hard. Mom, I didn't say that. The interviewer must have taken inspiration from something I mentioned, but I never said it like that. Well, people are calling and asking questions, she said, her voice rising. Your aunt saw it, your cousins saw it, they all think we abandoned you. Mom, I said softly, I didn't mean to hurt anyone. But that is what you said, remember? When I asked about grad school? There was silence on the line, then a sharp inhale. That was years ago, she whispered. We did what we thought was best. I know, I said quietly. But it was part of my story. I can't erase it. She hung up without another word. That night, Daniel texted me, you didn't have to make them look bad just to make yourself look good. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. The one thing I'd never wanted was to hurt them, but somehow by finally being seen, I'd exposed wounds that had never really healed. The next morning I opened my laptop again. There were dozens of new emails, offers, collaborations, even a few journalists asking to feature me again. But all I could think about was how quiet my phone was otherwise. No messages from Mom. None from Daniel. Not even a simple congratulations. I thought success would fix everything. That once I made it, they'd finally see me as enough. But now, standing at the peak of everything I'd worked for, I wasn't sure what I'd really gained. And deep down I could feel it, the storm hadn't even hit yet. Something was coming, something that would force everything out into the open. And when it did, there would be no going back. Would you like me to continue to the climax section next, where all the hidden emotions and family tensions finally collide during a dramatic confrontation? The night before the award ceremony, I barely slept. My heart raced every time I closed my eyes, and all I could think about was how far I had come, from the girl told to earn her own way, to a woman being recognized for her hard work and creativity. The next morning, I stood in front of the mirror, fixing my blazer with trembling hands. I wanted to look confident, even though inside I was a storm of emotions, pride, anxiety, and a lingering ache from my family's silence. I hadn't heard a single word from them since the campaign's success went viral. My parents didn't call, didn't text, didn't even send a short congratulations. It was like I had achieved all of this in a vacuum. Still, I told myself I would walk into that room with my head held high. When I arrived at the ceremony, the atmosphere buzzed with energy. The hall shimmered under soft golden lights, and people in sleek suits and elegant dresses mingled, chatting about projects, awards, and future collaborations. I recognized a few faces from the industry, people I had once admired from afar. Now I was among them. My agency director spotted me and waved enthusiastically. You look incredible, she said. This is your night. Just breathe and enjoy it. I smiled, but inside something still felt incomplete. There was this invisible thread tying me back to that old ache, the memory of being told I wasn't worth investing in. The ceremony began, and one by one awards were announced. My category was one of the final ones of the night, Creative Breakthrough of the Year. As the host began reading the nominations, my palms turned damp. My name was the last one on the list, and hearing it echo across the room made my stomach flip. The audience clapped politely, and I tried to look calm, though my heartbeat thundered in my ears. Then the host paused for effect, smiled, and said, "And the winner is Amina Lewis." The room erupted in applause. For a moment, time froze. It didn't feel real. I stood up slowly, clutching my bag, trying to remember how to walk properly. People around me smiled and congratulated me as I made my way to the stage. The bright lights hit my face and I blinked through tears. I took the trophy, hands trembling, and looked out into the sea of faces. "Thank you," I said, my voice shaking. "This means more than I can put into words. I was told once that I had to earn my own way, and I did. Every late night, every rejection, every doubt led me here. So if anyone out there feels unseen, just remember, your effort matters even when no one believes in you yet." The audience cheered. It was the loudest applause I had ever heard. Cameras flashed, people stood up, and for that brief, shining moment, I felt like everything had come full circle. I walked off the stage feeling lighter than I had in years. But as I reached the lobby to catch my breath, I froze. My parents were standing there. My mother held her purse tightly, her eyes glossy. My father's expression was unreadable, but there was something softer about him than I remembered. For a few seconds, none of us spoke. The noise from the hall faded, leaving just the quiet hum of tension between us. My mom was the first to break the silence. "You were amazing," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "We watched everything." My throat tightened. "You watched?" I asked, barely above a whisper. My dad nodded. "We did. And we're proud of you, Amina." For a second, all the years of frustration and hurt came crashing down. I wanted to cry, to scream, to ask why it took success for them to finally see me. But instead, I just stared at them, unsure what to feel. Then my mom reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. "We wanted to help with your new studio," she said. "It's not much, but—" I interrupted her gently. "Mom, you don't have to." My voice shook, but I managed a small smile. "I built it. I'm doing fine now." Her eyes filled with tears and she looked down. We didn't realize how hard it was for you," she whispered. "We thought we were teaching you independence, not pushing you away." My father sighed deeply, his voice low and heavy. "We were wrong." It was the first time I had ever heard him say those words. For a moment, I didn't know how to react. I dreamed of hearing that for so long, but now that it had finally happened, it didn't bring the satisfaction I expected. It felt bittersweet. Like too much time had already passed to undo the distance between us. As we stood there, a photographer from the event approached and asked if I wanted a picture with my family. I hesitated. Then I saw the hope in my mom's eyes and the quiet guilt in my dad's. Slowly I nodded. We posed together, me holding the trophy in the center, their hands resting gently on my shoulders. The flash went off, freezing that fragile, complicated moment in time. After they left, I stepped outside to get some air. The city lights shimmered around me and a cool breeze brushed against my face. I took a deep breath and looked up at the night sky, thinking about everything that had led me here. I had worked tirelessly to build something from nothing, to prove my worth not just to my parents but to myself. But now that I had their approval, I realized something: I didn't need it anymore. I pulled out my phone to check my messages, and that's when I saw it, an email notification. It was from a university overseas, the same one my brother had attended for his master's. The subject line read, "Collaboration Opportunity." My eyes widened as I opened it. They wanted to feature my campaign in a marketing case study and invite me to speak at a guest lecture. That's when the twist hit me. My brother was the teaching assistant for the course. He was the one who had suggested my name. I stared at the email in disbelief, reading it over and over. After everything that had happened, all the rivalry, the resentment, the years of distance, it was my brother who had opened this next door for me. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. But one thing was clear. Life had a strange way of coming full circle. I had earned everything on my own, but maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late to start rebuilding the bridges I thought were burned forever. The thought made my chest feel lighter. As I walked down the street toward my car, I smiled to myself. The story wasn't ending here. In fact, it felt like it was only just beginning. The night after the ceremony, I sat by my apartment window, still wearing the same blazer from the event, the trophy resting on the coffee table beside me. The city lights sparkled below, but my mind was somewhere far away, somewhere between pride and peace. The past few days had been a blur, and I hadn't had time to truly process everything. My parents showing up, the apology, the email from the university, it all felt like too much, too fast. I thought about the little girl I used to be, the one who waited for her parents' approval after every school achievement, and how that same girl had learned, slowly and painfully, to stop waiting. I opened the email again, rereading the words. The university wanted me to come for a 2-week workshop to talk about branding, resilience, and building success from scratch. It sounded surreal, standing in the same halls where my brother had studied, but this time, not as a student seeking approval, but as a professional being invited to teach others. I smiled softly. Life had a funny way of balancing things out even when it took its time. The next morning I called my brother. We hadn't really spoken since I found out he'd mentioned my name for the project. He answered on the second ring, his voice calm but hesitant. "Hey, Amina." "Hey," I said. "Got your email." There was a small pause before he said, "I wasn't sure if you'd want to do it. I just thought it could be good for you. For both of us." I could hear the sincerity in his voice, and for the first time in years, there was no competition between us. No silent race for validation. Just two grown-up siblings trying to understand each other. "Thank you," I said quietly. "That means a lot." We talked for almost an hour. About life, work, and how different things had turned out for both of us. He told me how hard grad school had actually been, how he'd struggled with loneliness, pressure, and expectations. "It wasn't as easy as it looked," he admitted. "I thought I was making our parents proud, but half the time I felt like I was drowning. Hearing that softened something inside me. For so long I'd only seen his privileges, not his struggles. I realized that maybe we both had been victims of our parents' uneven expectations, just in different ways. When I finally hung up, I felt lighter. The bitterness that had lived in my chest for years seemed to fade, replaced by something closer to understanding. That evening, I started planning my presentation for the workshop. I decided to title it, Earning Your Own Way, The Power of Building Yourself When No One Believes You. It felt personal, honest, and true to my journey. A few weeks later, I boarded a flight to the university. The moment I stepped onto campus, memories of my brother's stories came flooding back. The same pathways he'd walked, the same library where he'd spent long nights studying. Now, I was here for my own reason. During the session, the hall was packed with students, bright-eyed, eager, and curious. As I spoke about my journey, about starting small, about rejection, about the long road to success, I could see their faces light up. I told them that sometimes the lack of support isn't a curse but a test, one that teaches you strength you never knew you had. After the session, one student came up to me and said, "Your story made me feel like maybe I can do it too. My parents don't support my career choice, but hearing you talk gave me hope." That single sentence made every painful memory worth it. I realized that my struggle had turned into something bigger than myself. It had become a story that could inspire others who felt unseen, unheard, or unsupported. That night, I met my brother for dinner near campus. It was a quiet restaurant and the air felt calm, almost peaceful. He looked at me and smiled. "You did really well today." I sat in the back of the hall. "You didn't see me, but I was there." I laughed. "You were spying on me?" "More like cheering for you," he said, grinning. "You've really built something incredible, Amina." "I mean it." I smiled, grateful for his words. We talked for hours, about childhood memories, our parents, our mistakes. By the time we left the restaurant, it felt like something that had been broken for years was finally being mended. When I returned home, my parents called. This time it wasn't about guilt or regret. My mom asked how the trip went, my dad wanted to know about the workshop, and they both listened, really listened. There was warmth in their voices that hadn't been there before. It didn't erase the past, but it was a start. Families aren't perfect. They learn, they stumble, they heal in their own time. Months passed and my business grew even more. I started mentoring young women who wanted to launch their own creative careers. I shared everything I'd learned, not just the technical skills but the lessons about self-worth, resilience, and independence. One of my students once asked, "Do you ever wish your parents had helped you like they helped your brother?" I thought about it for a while and then said, "No. Because if they had, I might not have learned how capable I really am." It was true. Every challenge had built me into someone stronger. I had learned that success wasn't about proving others wrong. It was about proving to yourself that you could rise, even when no one else was lifting you. My parents' doubt had once been a wound, but now it was just a reminder of where I'd started. One Sunday afternoon, my family gathered for dinner for the first time in years. My brother brought dessert, my mom cooked my favorite dish, and my dad made a toast. He raised his glass and said, "To Amina, who taught all of us what it really means to earn your way." Everyone clapped softly and I smiled, holding back tears. The room was filled with warmth, the kind that comes not from perfection, but from forgiveness and understanding. As I looked around the table, I realized that success isn't always about money, awards, or recognition. Sometimes, it's about healing the things that once broke you and finding peace where there used to be pain. My journey had started from a place of hurt, but it led me to self-belief, independence, and finally reconciliation. When the night ended, I stood by the window watching the stars. My life wasn't perfect, but it was real, and it was mine. I thought about every no I'd heard, every obstacle I'd faced, and every moment I'd doubted myself. They had all shaped me into someone who didn't just earn her own way, but built her own path entirely. In that quiet moment, I whispered to myself, I did it. Not to prove anyone wrong, but to honor the version of me who never gave up. And that was the real victory. Not just in business, not in awards, but in finally finding my own peace, my own voice, and my own way forward.